Hey everyone, I'm Josh. I'm an investment actuary and a qualified researcher, and here are 3 lessons I learned from Morgan Housel's new book, The Art of Spending Money. So lesson 1 is that spending is behavioural. So I think a lot of people try and rationalise their spending behaviour either to themselves or to others. But the point Morgan's making is that people aren't behaving rationally, they're behaving emotionally based off their lived experience. So spending money in one way makes total sense to them, whereas to you it might not make sense at all. A direct quote from his book is, "Never make fun of how someone spends their money because they learned it from living." So this is something that actually, when I first heard it, it was like a light switch went on in my brain. I spent a lot of time either rationalising my own spending to myself or to others, and when I realised that there were reasons why I was spending which were basically emotional, behavioural, not really down to any kind of logic, it allowed me to be gentle with myself, essentially, and recognise that I could start to shift things with that new information, i.e. I could start changing my spending behaviour and do things differently going forward. Obviously, I'm an actuary, I've got multiple qualifications in finance, but I definitely resonate with the point where he says that finance is taught almost as a science, not as an art, and it kind of leaves out the behavioural aspects of things, and that's something that I've definitely contended with throughout my career. I initially almost didn't pick up Morgan Housel's books because I thought, well, I'm a qualified actuary, I don't need to engage with this. I know it all already. I've been through all the professional qualifications, I've done all the exams. But yeah, it's a good example of not knowing what you don't know. And the second point is around that I think a lot of the personal finance advice that's out in the market is missing a trick, and it's missing this behavioural element, because there are all these rules out there that say things like, oh, save 20% of your salary or follow budgeting rule. But I don't know if you're like me, but I just could not stick to those rules. And it was because I had these behaviours, I had these habits, which were actually not set up in the way that were allowing me to achieve that goal. So once I realised it was behavioural, I then set about working out how to change those behaviours over time to better achieve my financial goals. I also really like this point from Morgan Housel because it fits with one of my mental models of the world, which is that we are agents acting within a complex adaptive system, and one of the characteristics of us as agents is that we are not perfectly rational. And Herbert Simon, who was a Nobel laureate, he won the Nobel Prize for economics, came up with this idea of bounded rationality. So we are rational up to a point, but beyond that, we start acting quite emotionally. Morgan Housel's version of this point, he writes in his book, "We are not rational, we are rationalising." Yeah, a great insight there. Obviously, behavioural finance has taken off in recent years. The ideas coming from thinking fast and slow. I think a lot of financial science is missing a trick here. The second point I took away from Morgan Housel's book is that buying things doesn't bring lasting pleasure. He talks about the idea that a lot of people think that if they had more money, they would have a nicer house, nicer car, and then they'd be happy. But he talks about this being a bit of a fallacy. He says in his book, spending money is probably the fastest way to get attention, but it's not durable attention, and it's probably the least effective towards the people whose respect and admiration you actually desire. It's like junk food. Very tempting, immediately satisfying, but long-term damaging. So I definitely learned this the hard way because I was a poor student for a long time, and then suddenly getting my job in the city, being paid a good salary, I started spending money to validate everything that I'd gone through to get to that point. And I found that it did make me happy, but that pleasure was fleeting, and you ended up on what they call the hedonic treadmill, which is you just keep chasing the next hit of pleasure by spending that money. And the problem with that is that money eventually runs out, and that's how you end up living paycheck to paycheck. Once you've recognized this, you can then flip it and do the inverse. You might take that short-term hit, like a little bit of pain, but long-term that kind of satisfaction like compounds over time, kind of seeing that steady increase rather than short-term hit and then drop. Morgan Housel then goes on in this particular chapter to quote a famous football player who says, "If you can get to a point in your career where your name becomes bigger than anything you can purchase, there's your value." So I actually think this is a great strategy for getting the things which you think money will get you, i.e. admiration, attention, respect from your peers, or ultimately status. And I've definitely found this as well. Unintentionally, I found that I actually have derived more status and benefit through focusing on my career and focusing on developing myself and the skills that I have, rather than trying to buy things to impress other people. Not that that was ever particularly a goal of mine, but I would say it's more about myself than other people. I think flipping that, I didn't anticipate that kind of benefit of focusing on my career, focusing on this YouTube channel, and the status and benefits that would come with that as well. So that's been a pleasant surprise, and I think this quote captures it really nicely. I also love this point as well because it fits within one of the systems archetypes, which is fixes that fails, and the idea that you have this kind of short-term, well-intentioned move you in the direction of your goal, that actually long-term ends up backfiring. And that's a common pattern we see in complex adaptive systems. So it's essentially where you try and do something that gives you pleasure in the short term if pleasure is your goal, and long term you actually end up having less pleasure. Going back to the junk food example as well. So yeah, you can definitely tell Morgan Housel's a bit of a systems thinker from this point. And the third point from Morgan Housel's new book, The Art of Spending Money, is that we should experiment with spending. So he makes the point that different people are going to enjoy different things, so money is going to work differently for different people. He advocates for doing this obviously within the confines of your budget. And by doing that, you can very quickly work out what you actually like, what you don't like. Make sure that you're spending money in the way that works for you, and you're not spending your money just for the satisfaction of other people. He also says that if you can't find your thing, there's a good chance that money has entrapped you, controlling your personality, and you are either addicted to saving money or you're just ignorant of its potential, becoming unable to use it as a tool to provide joy in your life. So I definitely experienced this firsthand. I definitely went through the exploration phase in my 20s and tried spending money on all sorts of things. So food, wine, meals out, fancy restaurants, bikes, motorbikes, clothes, books. I'm recently, now in my 30s, going through a more of a cutting phase. So I think I've eliminated nearly everything from that list except food, wine, and books. I think also the mistake I made was that I didn't realize how much I would change and how much my priorities would change over time. And Morgan Housel also talks about this in his other book, The Psychology of Money. I think we fail to anticipate how we're going to change in the future. So we kind of optimize around our current situation, which means that we become a bit more fragile to when things change. So my current change in situation is I have now 2 children. That means that I don't have the freedoms I used to have. So I can't go out for dinner as often as I'd like. So certain hobbies don't make sense. Also cycling, I can't go out for hours on end on the cycle ride anymore. So it's important to retain flexibility around that, and the best way to adapt to that over time is to try lots of things, experiment, press your winners and cut your losers. Interestingly, I also love this because this is a classic application of the evolutionary algorithm. So from systems thinking again, like how does evolution work, where you have like a fitness landscape, i.e. your current environment, and lots of variation occurs, which is your experiments with spending, and then you keep what works, cut what doesn't, and then eventually you become optimized for your current environment around your goal, which for evolution is survival or passing on the genes, but for spending money it is, I don't know, pleasure, joy, satisfaction, whatever you want to go for. So there we have it. They were my 3 key lessons from Morgan Housel's new book, The Art of Spending Money. I absolutely love his books. There are 3 of them now. So there's The Art of Spending Money, The Psychology of Money, same as ever. I think through reading the books, you can definitely tell he's a systems thinker, and you can draw kind of the parallels with his points to systems thinking, which is what I've tried to do here. Also, these aren't those types of books where they make one point repeatedly throughout the book. He makes, I think in this book, like 21 different points essentially, so 21 different chapters, and he's a great storyteller, so he brings out the stories which keep things entertaining. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to hear more from me, don't forget to check out this one here. Thanks.